The revolution will be live.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We want to get right to that blockbuster report in the New York Times, publishing a January letter from Trump's lawyers to Robert Mueller, the most detailed, authoritative, and explicit account yet of the president's legal defense in the Russia investigation. The memo makes a breathtaking claim of presidential power, arguing that the president could not have obstructed justice in the Russia investigation because the Constitution grants him unfettered power over federal investigations. A president, they write, can order the termination of an investigation by the Justice Department or the FBI at any time and for any reason. The lawyers also argue that the president's cooperation to date means he does not have to speak with Mueller. In light of these voluntary offerings, they write, your office clearly lacks the requisite need to personally interview the president. Having him testified demeans the office of the president before the world. And the letter confirms for the first time that President Trump personally dictated a misleading statement for his son, Don Jr., about that infamous Trump Tower meeting with Russian officials promising damaging information about Hillary Clinton. Those are the headlines. Let's dig into it now with the president's lead attorney, Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, thanks for joining us this morning. Now, this letter was written before you came on board. It was written by John Dowd and Jay Sekulow back in January. Before. But do you stand by the arguments made in this letter?
Oh, they're excellent. Yeah, as a legal arguments, I didn't see it at the time. Obviously, I wouldn't have been allowed to, but I know the argument. And it's very, very persuasive. It's similar to the article written by Ted Olson about 3 weeks ago, Weekly Standard, saying exactly the same thing, maybe adding a little bit more to it in terms of they're not making the proper record, the special counsel. So, I mean, this is basically, I think, what most constitutional lawyers who tend to try to protect the presidency would say.
So let's dig into some of the specifics. One, it makes it pretty clear that you don't think the president can be compelled to testify, cannot be subpoenaed here. So does that mean the president won't be sitting for an interview?
It doesn't mean that completely. It means that, you know, there's got to be a high bar they have to reach in terms of convincing us that they're fair, convincing us that we're going to get the things we need. I want to see the Spygate report. Haven't gotten it. I want to see the authorization that they have, which they gave to Judge Ellis, I think. But Judge Ellis hasn't written an opinion yet, which convinces me there's a real problem with it. Otherwise, the judge would have said, oh, yeah, you're authorized. That's the Manafort case. The couple of outstanding, very critical, we just can't do it without that. I would have every lawyer that you put on the show ripping my head off if I let them be interviewed without knowing that they're authorized.
Have you actually written a letter, or the president's team written a new letter to Robert Mueller? Yes, where you lay out the conditions under which you would accept an interview?
Jane Raskin did that for Jay and me, and Jane basically reiterated that. I think we added an extra point, or we should, which is, in addition to the constitutional issue, which will be, you know, a complex one, we admit that, although we think we have the better argument. The one that's definitive is the OLC, Office of Legal Counsel in the Justice Department, wrote a memo at the conclusion of the Clinton thing, the Clinton administration, and said, you cannot indict a sitting president, nor can you compel process. So it's part of the rules of the Justice Department. And Mueller is
nothing. Has he responded to the letter?
Has not.
No response to the letter.
And Mueller is completely surrounded by the rules of the Justice Department and agreed to follow them.
But so what is the state of play exactly with Robert Mueller now? He has not responded to that letter.
He's responded to other things. You know, look, if I were him, I wouldn't respond to the letter either unless I made the decision to go or not to go. If I'm not going to go, why respond to it? I got other things to do. And if I am going to go, then I better spend a month on it. I mean, Emmett Flood, who's the president's let's call him his in-house counsel, you know,
in the White House.
In the White House. And basically, this is his area of expertise. He represented President Clinton, represented President Bush. This is the area he knows probably better than anybody in the world. So we're relying on him, and as well as Jay and John did an excellent job. And everybody we've had look at this says, I guess what lawyers always say, we can't guarantee it, but 90%.
But back in
I should say 70%.
But back in 1998, you argued that President Clinton could be subpoenaed. Here's what you said to Charlie Rose.
All of the Watergate litigation resolved the fact that the president is not above the law, is not able to avoid subpoenas, and the president has a right, like anyone else, to go before a judge and say, this is being done for an improper purpose, this is being done for purposes of harassment. If a judge agrees with that, fine, but if a judge doesn't, then you have to testify.
So what's changed?
Well, I guess, first of all, I still agree with that exception, which a president can go before a judge and say it's for purposes of harassment, it's unnecessary. We win that.
And that's what you intend to do if you're subpoenaed?
Oh, gosh, yeah. We'll say, hey, you got everything you need. You got 1.4 million documents. You have 28 witnesses. The president has given every explanation and corrected some. that were misimpressions, you got everything you need. What do you need us for? In fact, most prosecutors don't have the subject or target or whatever you want to call the president, although he's only a subject right now, and I think will remain that. They don't have him, so they have to make a decision without it. So come on, man up and make your decision.
North Korea summit is back on. How does that play into a potential interview?
Well, look, you know, from our very narrow point of view, Jay and I and our team, of course, it interrupts it because it isn't just the interview and the facts of the interview. It's the whole situation of are we going to do it or not do it? This is the president's decision ultimately. And you got to understand this.
He says he wants to do it.
George, you've interviewed him, you know him, you've talked to him. Everybody, I don't think anybody that doubts he wants to do it. He believes he's telling the truth. He is telling the truth. He believes that he should win. Justice should win out. I'm a lawyer. I have years of prosecution and defense. It's not that simple. I mean, what I believe is the truth, you may think isn't. And they seem to have the heavy reliance on Comey. I think that's going to get knocked to heck with the Horowitz report, the Inspector General. He's doing the whole Hillary Clinton investigation. And I mean, one of the main reasons for firing Comey was how unfair that was to both of them, to both Hillary Clinton and to President Trump.
So you're still recommending he does not sit down for the interview?
Jay and I want to keep an open mind, and I have to just be honest, I mean, with leaning toward not. But look, if they can convince us that it will be brief, it'll be to the point, there are 5 or 6 points they have to clarify, and with that we can get this over, this long nightmare for the American public over. When you ask me about Korea, you know how terrible I feel when I have to call them up? This letter comes out, which, I mean, somebody should be looking at these leaks and find out who the heck it is. I know.
Well, you have no evidence that it came from the special counsel.
Come from DOJ, it could come from a lawyer, but whoever it is, we should find out who it is. I have no objection to sitting down and testifying, and you put me under oath. I don't care.
So you didn't do it? You
I didn't do it. Jay didn't do it. Jane didn't do it. Marty didn't do it. Pat didn't do it. We didn't do it.
How about Mr. Dowd?
I don't think he did, but hey, you got to ask John. I mean, John, look, we're very grateful to John. This was a great job. He and Jay did a great job here. They set this up beautifully. We can add the OLC argument to it, which I think puts it over the top, and the Olson argument, which is the one I was talking about way back with Bill Clinton. And I think we win this.
The most breathtaking claim, to my eyes, in the letter is that claim that the president basically cannot be investigated for obstruction of justice, that he can terminate an investigation at any time for any reason, any time for any reason.
I think that, look, when you argue the broadest possible point. We don't have to go there.
Well, you do go there.
Well, I didn't. I wasn't there then. I'd save that as the last argument. I think the stronger argument is he didn't. How about he didn't? I mean, firing an employee when you know that another employee is going to come in and take that job and further the investigation cannot possibly be obstructing the investigation. He said that to Lester Holt when he was interviewed within days of doing it. So you've got a contemporaneous statement of his intent. So how's that obstruction?
But let me just
How about the Flynn conversation? Saying to a potential prosecutor, give the guy a break. You put Chris Christie on later and ask him how many times was he asked, give him a break. You know what that means. You take into consideration the fact that the man was a war hero, a patriot, a father, his children are sick, whatever, you know, the whole thing. Sometimes you don't indict, sometimes you lessen the severity of it, and sometimes you ignore it.
But just to be clear, to press that point, because the letter is very explicit. It says any time for any reason. If the FBI developed evidence that the president had accepted a bribe or committed murder, the president could terminate that investigation?
I would not go that far. I would not go that far, George. I mean, John, you'd have to ask John exactly what he's relying on for that. I wouldn't go that far. I think under circumstances where there's where at best there's ambiguity as to whether there was intent. Well, for every one of these things he did, we can write out 5 reasons why he did it. If 4 of them are completely innocent, and one of them is your assumption that it's a guilty motive, which the president would deny, you can't possibly prosecute him.
Letter also,
or recommend impeachment.
Letter also cites the president's pardon power. Do you and the president's attorneys believe the president has the power to pardon himself?
He's not, but he probably does. I mean, he has no intention of pardoning himself, but he probably does. It doesn't say he can't. I mean, that's another really interesting constitutional argument. Can the president pardon himself?
You think it's an open question?
I used to run the pardon attorney. It would be an open question. I think it would probably get answered by, gosh, that's what the Constitution says, and if you want to change it, change it. But, yeah.
A lot of focus on the president.
I think the political ramifications of that would be tough. Pardoning other people is one thing. Pardoning yourself is another. Other presidents have pardoned people in circumstances like this, both both in their administration and sometimes the next president, even of a different party, will come along and pardon.
A lot of focus on the president's pardon power this week. He pardoned Dinesh D'Souza, we saw this week. Roger Stone says the president is sending a signal to those caught up in the Russian investigation.
He is not. I think what he's doing, I think the president feels guilty that some of these were delayed. Maybe there was too much concern with injustice or the White House about doing it because it would look bad. These are so different than the cases he's involved in. And the issue of any pardon there is so far down. No, I mean, except for a couple of guilty pleas, nobody's really been convicted yet. And the cases that are involved are totally tangential. I mean, they're off on a lark here. The Russian thing. I mean, $180, dressing up like a clown or something and going to one of Hillary's events. Gosh, we used to have clowns coming to our event. I don't know if they were dressed up or not.
But you don't fully know that Robert Mueller has wrapped up his investigation into collusion or any cooperation between people associated with President Trump and the Russians who were interfering in our campaign.
I do not know that. I don't know that, and probably we're not going to know that until he concludes. I got a feeling he did. I have a feeling that collusion has come up completely empty. That's why I want to see the reports on Spygate, because I believe that came up empty.
Well, let's talk about that a little
and that'll
bit.
be exculpatory.
Because Trey Gowdy, a senior House Republican this week, said he got the briefing, and here's what he had to say after it.
I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
He's a senior Republican. All the Democrats who got the briefing said the same thing.
Well, I don't think that that's the issue. Look, that goes to the legitimacy of the investigation. I think it was illegitimate. Maybe they can show me it isn't. I have an open mind as to that. I want to see what they revealed. What do they find? We're concentrating on technicalities, important though they are.
But at this point, you have no evidence the FBI did anything wrong.
No, but I also have tremendous suspicions because they concealed it for a year from the president. If it shows nothing, which we all believe it doesn't, if it was perfectly proper, then why wasn't it shown to the president? Gosh, as soon as he got into office, the investigation was over. It's a concluded investigation. There's no reason not to show it to him. There's no reason not to show it to us. And the more they refuse to show it, I'm sorry, my instincts as a prosecutor tell me there's something wrong.
And a lot of people look at the president's shifting explanations, the White House shifting explanations for what happened in that meeting at the Trump Tower back in June of 2016 with Don Jr. I remember when this was first reported, Jay Sekulow was on my program, said the president had nothing at all to do with that letter. Later, Sarah Sanders said, well, wait, he sort of weighed in, but he didn't dictate it. And now this letter from the president's lawyers say very, very clearly he dictated the statement. How do you explain those shifting explanations?
Happened to me with the whole situation of repaying the money that was laid out by Cohen. When the president first talked about it, nobody focused on it, nobody thought about it. That was a very busy time. And then when we got on board, I went through everything. It was the only change we had to make. At that point, this other change had been made. When you consider the big scope of this narrative, four or five changes.
It's a complicated thing. The president was there. He was dealing with the letter. At first, it was all denied, and now you're saying he dictated.
But I don't know that Jay would have to answer that, and I've talked to him about it. I think Jay was wrong. I mean, this is the reason you don't let the president testify. Our recollection keeps changing, or we're not even asked a question, and somebody makes an assumption. In my case, I made an assumption. Then we corrected it, and I got it right out as soon as it happened. I think that's what happened here.
I was struck by something else in the letter. And when you're discussing that dictation by the president, the letter says that this was a private matter between the president and the New York Times. Is that really correct? I mean, when you give a misleading statement to a newspaper or say something misleading on television, it's not just to the organization, it's to the viewers, it's to the public.
Again, I didn't write the letter, but I think it means it's not a 1001 situation. For example, if you said that, and that's, again, the danger of being interviewed. If I say something wrong on this show, and sometimes I did, George, in the past, not this time.
We all do. We all make mistakes. When we make mistakes, we try to make corrections.
If you were the FBI, my goodness, they could prosecute me for the mistake. They'd say, of course, it was a lie. So that's the point it's trying to make. They're trying to say it's non-governmental. It's not under oath. It's not under interview with the FBI, like some of the prosecutions have been interviews with the FBI. Martha Stewart was under oath.
That was under oath. But as you know, articles of impeachment, both for Richard Nixon and for President Clinton, included lying to the public.
Very broad. I had the position, even with the Clinton impeachment, that was a terrible mistake, both legal and political. I thought, and first of all, Congress is going to impeach somebody for lying to the press? Come on. They do more lying to the press than anybody.
Bottom line, Will the president testify? And do you still believe that Robert Mueller is committed to wrapping this up by September 1st?
As a second first, I believe he is because of the midterm elections. He's as sensitive as everybody to not doing another Comey and interfering horribly in the election. I don't think it had as big an impact as some people think, but look, they have a right to think that. Second, I do think that it's still an open question, but it's beginning to get resolved in favor of not doing it unless they start coming across with things that we're asking for.
Mayor Giuliani, thanks for your time this morning.